This lecture is on the very famous American composer, conductor, pianist, and educator, Leonard Bernstein. His dates 1918 to 1990. He was born in Massachusetts. He was a Harvard graduate, very influenced by David Prohl, who was an aesthetics professor, as well as Aaron Copland. His connection to Philadelphia was his study at the Curtis Institute. He studied conducting with Fritz Reiner and Sergei Koussevitzky. He studied orchestration with Randall Thompson. Not only was he a great conductor of the New York Philharmonic, but he was also an educator, giving us Omnibus, Young People's Concerts, 1953 to 1972, and the Harvard Lectures, known as the Unanswered Question. What's interesting about this is before Bernstein's time, the orchestral concerts would actually be a place where you just hear music. Bernstein decided that it was important to educate through what you were hearing. So he created these young people's concerts where he would invite young children to come and not only listen to the music, but hear about form and understand the music that they were actually listening to. On the other hand, he has not only for the young children, but he also has the wonderful Harvard Lectures. And the Harvard Lectures, the unanswered question, are for the connoisseur of music, people that have studied all their lives. And he makes connections between music, art, philosophy. For anybody that's interested in knowing more about Leonard Bernstein, we do have both sets of videos. The Young People's Concerts for the children, talking about form, and the Harvard Lectures, the unanswered questions. Bernstein was one to make political statements and to use his status as a famous musician to further social causes. Last year, there was an incredible exhibition of his works and showing his impact on society in the National Museum of American Jewish History in Philadelphia. Bernstein was looked at by the FBI. There is an 800-page file on activities since 1949. You have to remember in 1950s there was the Red Scare, and the FBI had a security index. That meant that in the case of a national emergency, anyone could be arrested and placed in a detention camp as an enemy sympathizer. As you can guess, Bernstein was on that list to be watched. Bernstein supported civil rights, racial equality, objected to civil liberties, opposed military intervention in the Vietnam War. He raised legal defense funds for a group of Black Panthers. Two works that I'm going to ask you to listen to and to watch. One is The West Side Story, Symphonic Dances, and the other is The Mass. I would like you to actually experience these symphonic dances from West Side Story, meaning that these were dances just like when we talked about the ballets of Copland, that they were done in concert form without the rest of the musical theater production. In the YouTube that I've chosen, you will actually witness Leonard Bernstein conducting his own orchestral work from West Side Story. The story of West Side Story, if you remember, the musical theater, was created by, of course, Leonard Bernstein created the music. The lyricist was Stephen Sondheim. Jerome Robbins was the choreographer. Harold Prince was the producer. And the story goes in 1947, Jerome Robbins wanted to collaborate with Bernstein on a contemporary Romeo and Juliet. But the plot was to be about a girl from a Jewish family and a boy from a Catholic family, and it was to be called East Side Story. In 1957, West Side Story was based on the gangs, the Jets and the Sharks. What's really interesting is Bernstein, at the same time he was creating West Side Story, was also composing the operetta Candide. And because of it, some of the songs actually got switched. What you hear in West Side Story, One Hand, One Heart, and Officer Krupke, could have possibly been a part of Candide. The other work that I wanted you to listen to and watch was the very famous Mass. Bernstein's Mass premiered in 1971. It was called a theater piece for singers, players, and dancers. It was commissioned by Jacqueline Kennedy for the opening of the Kennedy Center, Washington, D.C. The text was from the traditional Latin Mass, as well as text written by Bernstein and Stephen Schwartz. If you know anything about the Catholic Mass, it's a set of prayers, prayers of the ordinary, that Bernstein does use, the Kyrie, the Gloria, the Creator, Sanctus, and the Agnus Dei. But what Bernstein does with them is very non-traditional for the Catholic Church. He uses non-traditional forces, like a rock band, marching band, and some of the ways that he actually creates the ritual of the Mass became very controversial. The Mass itself was thought to have anti-war and anti-establishment messages hidden in the Latin text, which prompted Nixon not to attend. So it was a controversial work, especially using the Catholic Mass in a very different way. I would like you to find a critique of the premiere that would have addressed this controversy. If you do not watch the entire work, as I have given you the YouTube for the entire work, at least watch the first 10 minutes, which includes the very famous simple song. I also want you to hear and see Bernstein talking about his teachers and lecturing on music. He was a brilliant educator, lecturer, conductor, pianist, and social activist, making a difference with his life and his music.